I do apologize if my voice cuts out. Allergies are bad right now. So our presenter today is Ronda Spaulding. She has worked directly with children who are medically fragile for over 8 years in several different places, or in several different roles at A Rosie Place for children. Most recently, she serves as the Respite Program Coordinator. In her role, she works directly with families from their first inquiry into the services offered through the intake process and continuing through their regular respite stays. She is zealous about compassionate care and creating an environment where children, regardless of their abilities, are able to feel safe, loved, and fun. She has several certifications, an accreditation from the Council on Quality and Leadership, as well as the American Association of Multisensory Environments. And she's also a strong proponent of the concept of general teaching and caregiving roles. So Rhonda, I'm going to let you go ahead and take over.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I'm looking at my screen and seeing that it says Advocacy Links Respite Program Coordinator, which isn't very accurate. Something happened when I took out a line or something. So, yes, I am the Respite Program Coordinator at A Rosie Place, and I work with families. That is the sum of my job is to speak with them, get them through the initial process, reassure them. And so through that experience, I really have come to see their world. I have no personal experience. My children were all born healthy and have lived healthy lives. So it's been eye-opening, and it's always inspiring. These families, as I know many of you know, as you also obviously work with these kinds of families that face stresses different than ours, they're just amazing, many of them. And in the case of the medically fragile children, their child probably wouldn't be alive if it weren't for the care that they provide and the advocacy that they themselves have to do in order to ensure their child's well-being. So I am super excited to talk to you guys today. This is me actually with one of the kids here at A Rosie Place, and they just are amazing, as you know, and they are my favorite subject. So the fact that I get to talk to you all today about them is a thrill, frankly, and I hope we can maybe learn some new things. I feel a little humbled speaking to you all because I know that you have so much contact with so many families, and you work so hard doing exactly what we try to do, which is to advocate for them. So I will just tell you what I know, and I'm sure it will resonate with many of you. So to get started, of course, I think our focus is medically fragile, and really defining that. A lot of times that's such a loaded phrase because, and I find that when we talk about it, when I say, oh, I work with medically fragile children, we provide respite, you get a blank stare because those are words people are processing. But we always maintain that they are first a child. They are, in fact, a child who is medically fragile. And a few years ago, we actually changed a lot of our verbiage, and you'll see that throughout here. I do go back and forth, but we always said medically fragile child, and we chose to change that around and say a child who is medically fragile whenever we can. It gets a little clunky, so sometimes we revert back to the shorter way to say it. But I mean, look at this face, cutest kid ever. And lots of what we, obviously not your typical child. He's got lots of stuff. But he's wide-eyed and exploring his world and just brings so much joy to his parents. So kids that are medically fragile, it's a specific type of kid, but the causes of that fragility vary greatly. It can be premature birth, a traumatic brain injury. Some of our kids have uncontrolled seizure disorder. Cancer and other terminal type illnesses can cause, obviously, fragility. Spina bifida, chronic lung and heart disease, neuromuscular diseases, swallowing disorders that require specialized feeding systems, complications from surgery, and other chronic health conditions like diabetes or asthma can even become so severe that the child is in fact fragile. And the commonality for all these kids is that they require skilled care 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Their conditions are sometimes temporary, sometimes lifelong, and sometimes terminal, but they all require this level of care. We have just, here's just some of our beautiful faces, different stages of life. We have so many children who have outlived what parents were told to expect for them, and that's always exciting, and reaching milestones that parents never dreamed they would. And that's not always the case, but that's always what we hope for. And the quality of life while they live that life is obviously our focus. And you can see in this image, there's some equipment. This is one of our kids getting his trach suctioned by his mom, a young mom here, but just the happiest kid you'll ever meet. He doesn't know anything else, and so a lot of times people say to me, "Oh, I couldn't do that. How do you do that? It must be such a sad job." And I must tell you, it is not a sad job. There are sad times, but these kids are so full of joy and just they're children, and so they really don't know differently. They know that they're loved and cared for, and that's for us, then that's success. So again, with the equipment, this is kind of I chose these pictures because they're very telling. Like this little girl on the left, obviously adorable. There is no developmental delay in either of these kids. So that varies as well with the kids. But everywhere she goes, all this stuff goes with her. In the car, to school when she's old enough, if they choose to send her. This is their life, day and night, this equipment. And then this little cutie pie, you can see his G-tube here, and he's getting a breathing treatment, which he's assisting with. So that's always nice. So we always say, these kids come with lots of accessories. They're well accessorized, lots and lots of stuff. But you can see the joy here and the happiness. Equipment includes G-tubes, tracheostomies, ventilators, apnea monitors, suction machines, supplemental oxygen. It varies by the kid. Some of them have a lot. Some of them just have one. In order to be considered medically fragile in our definition, it's really just a need. These are not kids that can have a typical babysitter. So they're not just having the neighbor or grandma watch them. And so that's when we are able to come in. And then we're back to this cutie pie with all of his accoutrements or accessories, as we say. So, as I said, these kids have a life to live, and we try our best to make it amazing, and be a part of that and come alongside that family. And some of them have obviously a shortened life expectancy because of their fragility, due to just their fragile health. They have more of a risk of infection, illness, and then the degeneration of their condition. So that's the sad part of our job, is some of the children do pass away during the times that we're serving them, and that's always a heartbreak. But we always promise the families that we will never forget them, and we talk about them, and we have times of service where we memorialize them, and they're just very precious, and we're grateful that for the time that we got to have. So some statistics. This is kind of boring. There wasn't much I could do to make this exciting, but medically fragile children are a really small group of the greater special needs category. So 13 to 18, I've seen 20% of all children are considered to have special needs, and then a very small subgroup of them. And this statistic I cited here says 0.4 to 0.7% of all children are medically fragile, medically complex, and then of course the cost of their care is very great. But those are, they are precious children, and we as a society are caring for them hopefully as best we can. We know that here in our area, we're in northern Indiana, St. Joe County, and St. Joe County and the 6 surrounding counties, based on the census and statistics we found, there are approximately 2,000 medically fragile children in this area. So we have worked to try to find them. So we're on our way, and just trying to network always, and talking to groups like yours is helpful. But we know that they're out there, and we know that they need support. So that's what we all want to do as a community. The care of children with medical complexities or who are medically fragile is, in our current system, somewhat fragmented, at times uncoordinated. It's crisis-driven. There's a tendency to over-medicalize the child and to under-support the family caregivers, and that's actually a quote from CHA. So we know that, and that's where opportunities like this to talk about them and educate people are so valuable. They're a small population, but there's a great need there, and they are often underserved. It's also, excuse me, it's a growing population because of technology, because of the amazing advancements they've made in medicine and healthcare. These children are living more often, surviving events of their birth or childhood or disease, and living longer. And so with that comes a little growing issues as to how to support them. In our area, and as far as I understand it, in most areas, there is a tremendous nursing shortage, and it's nurses who are providing the care for these kids in the home and assisting the family so that they can carry on with somewhat normal lives. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. They require skilled care, and that's what's happening here. This child's getting a medicine, it looks like, through his G-tube. The treatments and the medications they receive just require that level of care. And again, I'll say these are not kids that grandma or the neighbor can babysit. And so that's a great need that our society is, trying to improve. There's pushes to find more nurses, educate more nurses, and get them out there. And part of what we do here is to participate in that process as well, to expose as many nurses as we can, or nursing students, to this population, and to maybe hopefully they'll consider that as a career path, to specialize in their care. So that's obviously the greatest need of a medically fragile child, is the nursing care they need to live. Other needs, of course, would be inclusion, being allowed access to typical childhood experiences that are just sometimes so much harder for them, or that they're not able to access. So just the basic things that we all think about as in raising our kids and watching our kids grow, or as when we were children, swinging on a swing outside, not always the easiest thing to achieve. Playing in the sprinkler, hard to do with lots of equipment. And so we've got some adaptive things that we've used here, just to allow that access. And I know that a lot of communities are trying to find ways to do that. So access and inclusion are always something that they are working toward. A lot of our kids go to school in spite of their medical needs. They sometimes attend with a nurse, but as part of the efforts to allow them the typical experience and the right to attend school. This was a quote that was said actually by one of our, he's a grandparent of a child, but it was such a true statement. These kids should not be limited by their abilities, should only be limited by their abilities, but not their opportunities. So trying to create opportunities for these kids, that's what it's all about, and allowing them ways to be kids. In our community, I know our one of our local fairs has a special needs day where families are allowed to come in, and I think it's free, or it's a very reduced rate, but it's set aside for them, the rides and all that. So that's really a neat thing. We do trick or treat here as a way to allow them a space where they can do what families do on Halloween, but in an environment that's safe and warm and adaptable to them and to their needs. I don't know if you guys have heard of Caroline's Cart, but there are grocery stores here locally. We have a couple who have these. These kids grow. They get bigger and bigger, and sometimes their needs don't change. They remain somewhat almost like an infant if there's a lack of control, head control, able to sit up, or they just need that support. So these Caroline carts they put in grocery stores, and I know our families, we've actually had families send us, this is one of our kids in the cart, to say mom was so excited that they had recognized the need and went out of their way to provide that to her family and to any family in the community. So stuff like that's awesome. And you see adaptive playgrounds popping up. Obviously, that's a way a community can come around these families and provide them a place to go and do fun things with their kids. And Make-A-Wish, of course, does such a great job. We've had some really neat stories. A lot of families go to Disney, but they don't all. A lot of them come up with some really creative ways to provide an amazing thing for their child. So those are just some ways that the community can wrap their arms around these kids. They travel with a lot of equipment. They need a diaper change. They need a place to feed their child, and so those are challenges that they face. When you haul out with your kids to go grocery shopping, it's I thought it was kind of hard myself, and I didn't have children with these kinds of needs. So I love to see these things in the communities, and I'm sure you all have communities, hopefully, that have some of those nice things. Some other things we have here are sensory-friendly movies. We have a Sky Zone that's like a trampoline park, and they also will have sometimes some events or some time set aside for families with limited mobility and sensory issues, so it's less noisy and all of that. So I think those are really cool. So we've talked a little bit about the child, but I want to talk about the family, because obviously whenever there's a medically fragile child in a family, all of the family members are impacted, and even extended family members in some cases. So part of my experience when I've talked to families is just hearing their stories and hearing the isolation that they feel, the challenges they face, and the threat to sometimes the survival of their family remaining intact. We know that genetic illness and sickness does not discriminate. It affects every demographic in all of our communities, every ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic group. It's everywhere, and it's all around us. So just that awareness and a willingness to kind of reach them. These, they live in every neighborhood. I know that I see. It's interesting now that I'm more aware of them. I was at the mall and I saw a mother giving a J-tube feeding to her child, and I don't know that what I would have thought of that before I'd become so familiar with them. But they're out there. They're often isolated, and so I don't think they're seen as much as they would be, and that I think creates that wonder for typical people. They just don't encounter these kids that often. These are some more of our families here. They're just the siblings are affected, the parents are affected. They're often have actually kind of lost relationships with extended family members. It's hard for people outside the family to understand. They often feel like other people don't feel like their child's life is worth living. And that's such a sad thing to hear a parent say, because obviously it's very it means a lot to them. We know from statistics that the divorce rate for these families, in particular families caring for a child who's medically fragile, is 84%. 84%. much higher than the national average, which I think is still hovers around 50%. They just face an amazing wearing and tearing on their relationship. The main challenge for them is managing their child's chronic health problems effectively, and also in the meantime juggling their role as a parent and the requirements of daily living, and often the marriage suffers. Of our own families here at A Rosie Place, when we look at our statistics of families where we have a recorded married or single status, we have 26% of our families, of our children, who are cared for by a single parent. So obviously we see some of that right there in our own statistics. Obviously, there's so much stress associated with caring for these kids, and we know that negatively affects often the parents' health, their own health and well-being, both physically and mentally. There's 40 to 70% of family caregivers have clinically significant symptoms of depression, and that's a statistic from Modern Medicine. They're tired. The physical demands of giving care to a child often increases as the child grows. Their needs don't change, as I mentioned earlier. They still need a lot of those same supports that they did as an infant, but now the transfer and the transportation of that child becomes often a very physically demanding job for these families. So we see that a lot, and I wanna take a minute here. I'm not sure if I can transition my screen very well. Bear with me. I'm gonna pop up this. So this is a video that we created last year, but the families can speak so much more eloquently about what their life is like. So I want to just show it. It's just 2 minutes. But I'm gonna let this roll. Oh. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Let me see if I can run it this way.
That's okay, Rhonda. Sometimes this happens.
I have this all loaded up.
I just want to let everyone know at the end we will have a chance that you can ask questions to Rhonda. Oh, here it goes.
Okay. Can you hear it?
No.
Can you guys hear that?
It's a little bit soft. It's a little hard to hear.
These children get to come overnight and have a sleepover for a few days at our place where they can really feel loved and cared for. We provide exceptional nursing care for these children, and it allows the parents to have a rest, a reprieve from the demands of 24-hour care. They're very isolated, these families and children.
Okay. Could you guys even hear that?
Yes, the reports back were that, yes, they could hear it.
Oh,
It was a little
good.
bit
Because
low.
after it got going, I thought, oh, I don't even know if they can hear this. So it's a little heavy, and I apologize for that. I think that often brings a tear to people's eyes, but that they can tell us so much better than I can tell you what some of the things that they face. So let me just follow that little bit of a heavy video with this humorous cartoon. It's just so true. So hopefully that brings a little brevity to our time here. um, so we've talked about the child, we've talked about the family, we've talked specifically about the caregivers, and then also specifically the children, or the siblings. So the siblings of these kids often have their own challenges that they have to face. They often feel alone and isolated. Obviously, most of their peers, sometimes all of their peers, don't have any idea what their home life is like, don't understand the alarms that go off, the equipment, the things that they can't do as a family because of some of the limitations placed on transportation and access. And they often take a back seat to the more urgent needs of the chronically ill sibling. And as all children, they naturally compete for the attention of parents. But those parents in these cases are often distracted, stressed, exhausted by caring for the fragile child. So we see that in our families. We've had families ask us, "Is there someone who does counseling?" And we've tried to hook them up that way. And I know you'll see that too, I'm sure, in some of your encounters with families. We have what we call Haven events here, specifically kind of for this reason. It's really to bring the families together, but it's to bring the whole family together. And we do those. Obviously, it gives parents a chance to network. It gives them a chance to share knowledge and experience and sympathize with each other and empathize. And it gives the fragile children, it kind of often becomes the thing these families do for that child. I had a parent tell me, we go to softball games and concerts and performances for our other children, and this is what we do for our fragile child. But at these events, we always try to really make the siblings feel special. We give them special stickers that show that they're the sibling of the fragile child, and we include them in activities. Sometimes we have certain activities just for siblings and then more adaptive activities for the fragile kids, but just as a way to let them know that they're not alone, and they get to be here and hang out with other siblings of fragile kids. And we've seen some cute little friendships come out of those, and a lot of the kids have honestly grown up here coming to these events. We've been doing them since I think 2009 or so. So actually before the house was finished and the respite program had officially started. So just really trying to address their need as well as part of that whole family. And then the other way these families are affected is financially. Obviously, there are different costs. A lot of things are covered by insurance and Medicaid and all of that, but there's still costs. And 57% of parents report that they have financial problems, and 54% report that a family member has stopped working. And we see that personally here, where they can't work, and the care that is provided for their child through the healthcare system or insurance or the waiver or Medicaid, it's not consistent enough. So they end up losing their job or not able to keep their job because they're gone so much or have to call off so much. So we know that has a tremendous effect on them. We try to we do a Rosie list where they can share some of their resources and just try to alleviate that. And anything we do for families is at no cost because we know that that's a burden oftentimes. So the needs for these children and families, obviously respite, a break. That's one of the main ways I feel like we can support these parents. Obviously understanding and coming alongside them, but being able to provide them a break, a short break from their daily, the demands of their child's care is so essential to them being able to recover and to carry on, and just knowing that they get that break, they've expressed to us is so helpful. They need that rest, and they need that opportunity to rekindle relationships, to give attention to their spouses, and to those other siblings. And so respite is obviously a really important part of how the community can serve them. And then the support, I think, really kind of falls into that broad category of how we respond to them, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But I've had a family tell me that it's so hard when they see people be uncomfortable around their child. People look away, they're not sure, it's very unfamiliar, and that's so isolating to them. So just being willing to go ahead and look them in the eye, smile, is so meaningful, and to include them in the world, that we're occupying, and to look at their child not as a burden or a bother. And I think many of them have built up walls because they feel that way. They feel like people look at their child and think, oh my goodness, that's not even a life worth living, and they don't feel that way, and so that just immediately creates a alienation. And then for the community, I put this here again, but that we talked about that under the child, and just all the ways that a community can support them. This is something we say often, and when we talk to donors and those, but really when we serve the child, we serve the family, and by serving that family, we serve our community. We create stronger communities, stronger families, and all centered on what we can provide for that child. So the individual response to these kids, I just want to touch on this, and we're almost done here. What can you do personally? And that is just remember that they're a child first. And I hope that doesn't sound like I think you don't think that, because I know you're obviously people who have a passion for caring for families. So, but there was a quote I'd read years ago in an article, and it just is so true. It's all worthwhile when it's your child. I've actually had people say to me, question the cost, question the quality of life, and it may not seem worthwhile, but it is when it's your child, and just remembering that. So some other ways, just some things to remember with, obviously these children are fragile and have a suppressed immune system. So this was a cute sign I found. Obviously they need us to protect them from their vulnerability, and we do that by being immunized, and washing our hands, and avoiding bringing any possible germ to them, and we're very vigilant here. And I think as you're going into homes, obviously you would want to consider that as well. Most parents are have learned to be pretty quick to protect their kids, and obviously risk depends on the kids. I think the ones who go to school are pretty exposed to quite a bit, but a lot of the kids don't go to school and have pretty isolated lives. So what we bring to them, obviously, this is so obvious, I hope it doesn't sound condescending or something. I just thought I'd throw it in there. One thing we always do here, and try to educate our staff when we bring them on, is we always say, assume intelligence. Our kids come all different ways. They come with lots of physical limitations, and sometimes almost none, almost no developmental delay or intellectual disability. Others have both, pretty significant developmental delays, as well as the physical limitations. But we always assume that they understand everything we say to them, to each other, around them, and that is so important. When we greet a new family, when we first meet a child, we always look them in the eye, get down on their level. It's a great effort for them to lift their head if they even can. So when we get down on their level, we give them an opportunity to see us and to see the look in our eye, to see the compassion on our face, the welcome. And we greet the child. We always say hello to the child first, and then obviously not leaving out the caregiver or the parent, but we greet them. And then we wait to see if there's a response, because sometimes there is, and sometimes we can assume that there won't be, and then there is something, and it can vary depending on the way they communicate. And then we have some kids here who do try to communicate, and it's very hard to understand them, or it takes a while to kind of learn how they sound. And I've learned, and I always tell new staff this: don't pretend you understood if you didn't, because they can see through that, and they know that, and that's so insulting to them. So obviously, it's all about they're human beings, and they want connections. So years ago, we had a support group or was a play group, and the person who organized it had made a flyer, and she meant to say companionship, and she accidentally put, or somehow it, autocorrect, it said championship. And I got it, and I saw the error, but then I thought, no, that's really what we do. We want to have championship with these children. So I put them both on the screen. Obviously, these children, like any other child, any other person, want to be with someone. They like spending time with people. And so that's something any of us can offer them. And then for championship, that's what we do. That's what you guys do. That's what I do. We try to be an advocate. We try to be a voice. We try to fight for their rights and their dignity. And so the picture here of the superheroes, this was an event we had a few years ago, and it was the theme was heroes, and we had so much fun with it, and the kids all had capes, and we just really tried to make it a fun kind of championship sort of theme. But yeah. So obviously, as part of that, we want to always be respectful and to give them as much dignity as we can, even during a diaper change, even during some kind of invasive personal attention that we have to give, and to always do so kindly. And I'm 50 years old, so I grew up in the 80s, and people said retard. It was just a very common adjective or name to call someone. And honestly, I still hear it. I hear it from my generation. I don't hear it from the younger kids. And I'm always, I just want to oh, please don't say that. But just, yeah, the words we use matter, and that one's really one that should go out of existence, I think. But obviously, I'm preaching to the choir here, I think, on respect and kindness and love and dignity and all of that. So I did want to touch just a little bit on gentle teaching. That's something we try to do here in our interactions with the kids. And it's just a wonderful tool. It's very obvious, right? When you look at it. Every human being, no matter of their ability or understanding, wants to feel safe, and they want to feel loved, and they want to have an opportunity to be loving, and they want to feel connected. So those are the goals of gentle teaching, is to create those feelings for people. And then the tools that we use to do that, the order I think of it is your eyes, that when you approach them, they're soft and loving and warm. And it just takes a little bit of thought to make sure that your face is showing what you would want to say and not something else. But our eyes say so much, and to just, again, look them in the eye and use your eyes to communicate for that they can feel safe and loved and be loving and connected. The other tool is our hands, that they're soft and light. And I think we're often afraid to touch these kids. And in some cases, it is appropriate to ask first or to wash your hands first. but they're people, and they do want to be touched. And just a light touch on the arm, acknowledging their humanity can be so powerful. And then, of course, the words we use, being tender and soft. Sometimes the kids have behaviors, and it's easy to react. We often teach our staff here, don't redirect. Telling some of our kids no or raising your voice, it has oftentimes the opposite effect of what we would expect. And so just to remain very calm and kind and gentle in our words, and offer them comfort through our voice. And then our presence, being present. They're so often ignored. Even when we're providing care for them, I feel like sometimes we can be very much about the task and not about the person. And there are times when we're sitting with the children, and maybe they're not a child that expresses very much or is able to move or speak at all. But we can be present with them. We can be tuned into them. They can have our full attention, even though it may be they're not able to express. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of gentle teaching, and I'm not in any way qualified to teach it, but it is something we found very useful here, and it just makes perfect sense, but it's not something that we always think about. So I think we're done. Thank you so much. I know you guys all do so much for families. The case managers I've gotten to know through my job working with you guys, I'm so impressed. I'm so glad you're out there, and I'm so glad you're doing the work that you do. So I'm done. We can move on. Oh, here I do have. Oh, go ahead. Yes. We don't need to do that.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Rhonda? And it might take them a minute to type it in.
Okay.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you. And we can never tell if they're, trying to type feverishly.
Yeah.
We do want to thank you, Rhonda, for your time today and sharing this information.
My pleasure and my privilege.
Another thank you very much, Rhonda, from one of our case managers. Love this presentation. So thank you for that. Is there any questions for Rhonda? And it can be about A Rosie Place, or it can be about medically fragile children. Just another comment. Thanks for being a great provider, and we appreciate you, Rhonda. And look that A Rosie Place does. So I'm not seeing any questions. I don't want to keep anybody longer than we have to. So another one, great information. So thanks everyone for, oh wait, here is a question. What is your ratio of staff to child?
Ridiculously high. On the good side. We, just because the kids need such one-on-one care, we use nurses, and then we do also have support staff, but it's very close to one-on-one at all times. And obviously some of our kids have the waiver, and some of them don't. Most of them don't have the waiver that we're able to get reimbursement for right now. So, but obviously if they have the waiver, then it's one-on-one, and then just depending on their need for the others.
Okay. And then again, a few other thank yous for the webinar.
You all know where to find me. If you think of a question later, just go to the website and you can probably track me down.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for logging on this Thursday morning, and I hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks, Joy. Oh, I'm sorry, Kara.
Okay. I still don't know how to change my name and thank you, everyone.